Hey guys, so we're going to do kind of like a truncated version of these online lessons today. I'm just going to do like a just short little sessions, just because we've got the one-to-ones going on. It's our final week. We're trying to get some essay practice in. So all I wanted to do was a couple of these. So this first one is just to go through the problems with Bazin's kind of philosophy in terms of realist cinema. So that's the key thing that I want to go through. And we started this in class or on the online version of the face-to-face lesson that we did. Okay, I'm just going to start from scratch and just go through kind of 7 or 8 things that I really want you to think about, because this is our argument. Okay, these are all parts of the complexity of the argument about realism versus expressive cinema. And as we've said, high chance that there's going to be a question that asks you to get into the weeds of this, a question that asks you, is Sunrise an example of expressive cinema or not? Or it won't even say that. It'll say something like, could you argue that your text is an example of expressionist cinema? Something like that. So in your head, could you argue it's an example of expressionist cinema? Right, my first argument therefore is, yes, I can, and here's how. And you analyse your sequence and you get into that kind of argument that it is. But then you've got the counter-argument that every single essay must have, where you've got to argue that, well, okay, yes, we can make a case for it as an expressionist piece of work, but can we make the case that it's also indebted to realist cinema, that it might be something else other than expressive, okay? And that's where we can bring in Bazin, we can bring in Bazin's ideas about realism, we can see if any of them exist in Sunrise, where you could apply any of those. And then if you want the A or the A star, which we do, when you get into the bottom of the paragraph, you could really get stuck into talking about Bazin, his ideas about realism, why they couldn't hold, etc., etc. So this is the high level stuff. So on your Bazin PowerPoint, I think it's slide 13, I'm going to go through some of these things and talk you through them. So you've got the notes there, you can make those notes, but you can make any additional notes as well, and it might help. So let's just briefly go through them, okay? These are the problems. It's important as well to remember that Bazin wasn't necessarily saying that cinema will one day be like I imagine it to be. He knew that couldn't be the case. He just knew it. But that didn't stop him being an idealist. You know how deeply religious and spiritual and philosophical he was as a thinker about life and cinema. This was an ideal he was aiming for, that he thought cinema should aim for. And he knew, he wasn't an idiot, he knew that cinema could never get there, okay, which is what we're going to explore now, why it can't get there. But that didn't stop him from thinking that artists shouldn't try, shouldn't aim. And that's because he was an idealist. So the problems, which he was acutely aware of, okay, but let's go through what they are. So Bazin himself admits, and this is a quote, it was montage that gave birth to film as an art. So what he's saying there is that the moment editing happened, the moment montage happened, and when he refers to montage, he doesn't mean our Rocky montage, our kind of Team America montage. What he means by montage is the placing together of separate shots to create a sequence. That's montage, okay? As far as Bazin is concerned, the moment that happened, we cut from this to that, then back to this again, film becomes an art. So by his own admission, film wasn't really an art form until montage, and montage is not realism. Montage is structured, constructed, and therefore artificial, okay? He also admits there's no art without artifice. It's in the very nature of the word. Art is artifice, okay? Art is a version of the thing. It is never the thing itself. Whatever the art form, okay? Whether it's painting, whether it's a novel, whether it's film, whether it's photography, okay? The art that's produced is a version of that thing. It is never the thing. The thing exists. The art is a recreation of that thing. And that recreation can be kind of hugely exaggerated and expressionistic, or that recreation can be kind of like an attempt to get it as real as possible, but it's still a recreation. So art is artifice, okay? One of the things that's most interesting to me, and this ties back all the way to when we studied City of God, and it also ties in a little bit to 20,000 Days on Earth, is supposedly authentic cinema is still inauthentic, okay? So cinema that uses handheld camera and no non-diegetic sound and improvised performances and non-actors in the roles, all the things we talked about, for example, in the runt sequence of City of God, that's an attempt by a filmmaker to make an authentic sequence in a social realist tradition. Okay, so that authentic cinema there is still inauthentic. It's still artifice. It's still a complete construction. It is not real. You could make the case to argue that cinema that attempts to be authentic like that, okay, is perhaps more manipulative than cinema that just is clearly artificial or constructed. You could make the case that it's way more manipulative and devious from a filmmaker's perspective to try and convince the audience that they're watching something actually take place, because you're purposefully manipulate. I mean, all cinema is purposefully manipulating, but they're doing it under this false pretense that this is authentic, when in reality, no cinema is authentic. So is it not more honest to just embrace the artificiality of cinema? Just be honest about it. There's a debate there to be had that's really interesting to me. It reminds me of what Ian and Jane, the directors of 20,000 Days, were attempting to do. And I know that we didn't have 20,000 Days together, and we're going to go over that again in the second year. I know that for a lot of you want to go back to that, and we absolutely will. But think about it this way, and a lot of you, I know that it's not everyone's favourite film, which I get, but it's an incredible piece of work. And maybe this is the key into it, right? To think about it like this. I think what they were doing with 20,000 Days is saying, look, documentary is inherently artificial. And we all tell this little lie to each other that documentary is real. It isn't. It's as constructed as fictional cinema. It's edited together. You know, the documentary filmmaker will have filmed for maybe 100 hours and they produce a 90-minute piece of work. But what happened to the other 98 and a half hours of footage? You've decided as a filmmaker, no, that doesn't help me tell my story, my subjective story. So you've got rid of it. And then you've condensed it, and then you've edited it into 90 minutes. And then you've added music, and you've added titles, and you've added montage, and you've added dissolves, and all these kind of different things. And then suddenly, you're being as inauthentic as any other type of cinema. And I think what the directors of 20,000 Days are saying is, let's just admit it. This is a construction. They all know we're here. Let's acknowledge it and go in the other direction. Let's make this as fake as we can. Let's make it as constructed as we can. And maybe in doing that, we can all get past this silly little lie that documentary or social realism is real. And we can get past that and actually find some truth. Because, as we said when we were studying City of God, there's a very big difference between being authentic and being truthful. You could make a very strong case that cinema can never be authentic, but any type of cinema can be true. You can find truth in a sci-fi movie, you can find truth in a German expressionist movie, you can find truth in a cartoon, you can find truth in these films, but you probably can't find authenticity because cinema cannot be authentic. Something to think about. So, as it says here, it's virtually impossible to make a film without some form of montage, without some form of movement, without some form of tampering with time and space. It's almost impossible to do that. You know, there's always a cut. There's always the camera might pan or tilt or track. You cut to a close-up. You cut to later in the day. You flash back. It's very difficult to make a film without those things. And when you do think of films without those things, you think of what? Recent example, people will say 1917. Nonsense. You know, there's a cut from day to night right in the middle of it, for example, and it's clearly still a construction. And isn't that a problem with that film? It's at pains to convince of as its reality. It's more manipulative in a way, which goes back to what we were just saying. There's one film I can think of. There's Russian Ark, which is a great film, but that's all one take, and it literally is one take. There's no cuts at all. It's all done in, I think, a single 90-minute take. Russian Ark inside of like a big old palace. There's also Andy Warhol film. I think it might just be called Empire State Building or Empire State or something like that. It's just a shot of the Empire State Building for 24 hours. So you could argue there's no montage there. You could argue there's no tampering there. However, as the next point says, any film, even those two films, Russian Ark and The Empire State Movie by Andy Warhol, every film is made by a creator. It's a subjective vision. Okay? So it's impossible for a film not to be subjective. Impossible. A film cannot be objective. Even Warhol training his camera onto the Empire State Building for 24 hours and not doing anything else, that is a subjective work of art because he's made the decision to frame it like he has. He's made the decision to leave it running for 24 hours. He's made the decision to not edit. All of those things are subjective artistic decisions, and therefore it's his version of that thing, not the thing. So it's still subjective. It's still inauthentic, essentially. So the very act of making a film is already tampering with reality. You're capturing it via artificial means. If cinema could become the exact double of reality, well, it wouldn't be cinema. It would be reality. So it cannot be. It's absolutely physically, scientifically, literally impossible for cinema to become the double of reality. It will always be a representation or a recreation of that thing, not the thing itself. Plus, you've got the bigger idea, which is you've got a more emotional, philosophical idea, which is why should it? Why should cinema attempt to be reality? Where does this moral obligation come from? For Bazin, it was a religious thing. Okay, but, you know, if you're an atheist like me, or you kind of don't have that same moral belief, then it doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to be realist. Be as expressive as you can. In fact, do you not have a moral obligation to run with the limitless possibility of cinema and do everything that you can with it? Because it's there and you can. I don't know. These are interesting philosophical questions about cinema. And these are the type of things that at the bottom half of the paragraph, when you've made your point, you've made your counter-argument, you've provided the evidence that you can really get into, and will get you the A star. Okay? So have a think about these ideas, make additional notes, and thanks for listening. All right, guys? Cheers. See ya.